Our economic and market principles were very different from most others, which accounted for our different results. I'll explain these differences in economic and investment principles and won't digress into them now. As former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan put it, the models failed at a time when we needed them most. JP Morgan had the American economy accelerating 3 days before the Lehman Brothers collapse. Their model failed. Good morning, everybody, and let's pin me on the Zoom. Hope everybody is well. I'm still not 100%, but I know how much you love the reading, so we're going to be reading anyway. Principles, Ray Dalio, and we have just been reading about different ideas and the 2008 financial crisis. Let's get into it. I have a lot of things that I want to catch up on since yesterday. I took it a little bit easier. So let's start doing this. Helping policymakers is the next section. Let's read and let's have a chat about some of these things that we're reading about. Helping policymakers. Our economic and market principles were very different from most others, which accounted for our different results. I'll explain these differences in economic and investment principles and won't digress into them now. As former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan put it, the models failed at a time when we needed them most. JP Morgan had the American economy accelerating 3 days before the Lehman Brothers collapse. Their model failed. The Fed model failed. The IMF model failed. So that left me asking why? What happened? Bill Dudley, president of the New York Fed, homed in on the problem when he said, I think there's a fundamental problem in terms of how macroeconomists look at the economic outlook, growth, and inflation. If you look at the big macro models, they don't have a financial sector typically in them. They don't admit the possibility that the financial sector could essentially melt down, and therefore the monetary policy impulse could be completely impaired. So I think the lesson of the crisis is to do a lot more work to make sure that the finance people are talking to the macroeconomist people and building models that are more robust. He was right. We finance people see the world very differently from the way economists do. As a result of our success, policymakers reached out to us more, which led me to have a lot more contact with senior economic policymakers in the US and around the world. Out of respect for the privacy of our conversations, I won't say much about them, except to note they became much more open to our non-traditional ways of looking at economics and markets, and more skeptical about traditional economic thinking, which had failed to either signal or avert the crisis. And this is a very, very interesting point. So when you run a business, when you're an investor, very often there are people that you do not talk to. And it's just tradition. You don't talk to those, you don't need to talk to those people. And so it never happens. Whereas the interesting thing is that very often when you open up the conversation to somebody that you usually wouldn't have that conversation with, you're going to get completely different insights. It might be contrary to what you're expecting. So they might tell you that what you're doing is wrong, and that might feel very uncomfortable. But it is actually very, very good to have this this ability to have people who are with you and against you in a conversation. And it doesn't happen very often, because very often we will think that everything we are doing is right if we don't have anybody that contradicts us. And we do our best to surround ourselves with people who only agree with us. And this can be very, very dangerous. The other thing is that there's a very interesting chapter in a book called, what's it called? It's called Think Like a Freak. And I can't remember which one. I think I have this one here at home. And it talks about a British Prime Minister. And Think Like a Freak, the people who wrote it, go and meet with this Prime Minister. And they have this idea and talk about the fact that something needs to change, that there's an inherent problem with, in this case, the NHS, which is the National Health Service of the UK. Now, his child survived because of the NHS, because he didn't have a lot of money at that time, and his child was saved by the NHS. So he wanted to keep funding it, and he also knew that it would be extremely unpopular to do something with the NHS that would seem negative, and he was scared that he would not be able to get voted back in if he made that change. However, what the two guys were talking about from Think Like a Freak, it made a lot more sense. It was going to be a lot better. And when they walked into the room, he said, "Oh, where are the smart people?" So he saw them as very, very smart people. But by the end of the meeting, he knew that there was no way he was going to be reelected. There was no way that it was going to be something that he felt positive about. And so he dismissed them and sent them away, even though the idea that they proposed was going to be so much better. Because with a national healthcare system, when everything is paid for you, and this is what Australia has been changing, for example. And I don't know what other countries are doing, but in Australia, we have Medicare, and Medicare will pay for everything for you. So if you need to go to the hospital, if you need x-rays, if you need this, if you need that, whatever you need, you used to get paid for. But now they introduced that you also have to do a co-contribution. So when you go to the doctor, you pay $7. When you do something else, you have to pay a little bit. And the reason that Australia has done this and what the UK decided not to do is do the same thing. And the reason it is important to do this, and it seems very, very ridiculous to most people, but the reason is because when something is completely for free, people will go to the doctor regardless of whether they need to or not. So it might not be everybody, it might not be you, but people will tend to go to the doctor more often, regardless of whether they feel bad or not. So I refuse to go to the doctor even if I'm feeling terrible. But then there's also the opposite. There are people who will go to the doctor constantly just because they know that they can. And so at the first sign of anything, even if it's nothing, they will go to the doctor. And so they were talking to the Prime Minister about this fact, but he refused to do anything about it. So it is really important to surround yourself with people who are going to disagree and to be open to what they say, and that you then weigh it up, because the UK government decided not to look into it at all, and the Australian government obviously did. So always surround yourself with not just people that agree with you. Most of our exchanges were one-sided. I generally answered their questions and didn't ask any that would put them in the awkward position of having to avoid answering for fear of compromising confidential information. I met with these leaders without making judgments and without regard for their particular ideologies. I approached them like a doctor, just wanting to make the most beneficial impact. They wanted my help because my global macroeconomic perspective as an investor was very different from theirs as policymakers. We were both products of our environments. Investors think differently and independently, and we anticipate things that haven't happened yet and put real money at stake with their bets. Policymakers come from environments that nurture consensus, not dissent, that train them to react to things that have already occurred, and that prepare them for negotiations, not placing bets. Because they don't benefit from the constant feedback about the quality of their decisions that investors get, it's not clear who the good and bad decision makers among them are. They also have to be politicians. Even the most clear-sighted and capable policymakers must constantly divert their attention from the immediate problems they are dealing with to fight the objections of other policymakers, and the political systems they must navigate are often dysfunctional. While the economic machine is more powerful than any political system in the long run, ineffective politicians will be replaced and incapable political systems will change. The interaction between the two is what drives economic cycles in the here and now, and it's not often pretty to watch. So this is really good. I've watched this tendency because politicians used to feel that they were above everything many years ago, and now they're actually listening. They still don't always follow the advice, but at least there is now an open dialogue, and even though things still haven't really changed perfectly, but at least the dialogues have opened up a little bit, which makes me very, very happy. Okay, making great returns. Our returns in 2010 were the best ever. Nearly 45 and 28% in our two pure alpha funds and close to 18% in all weather. Almost exclusively because the systems we had programmed to take in information and process it were doing it superbly. These systems work far better than we can do with just our brains. Without them, we would have had to manage money the old and painful way. By trying to weigh in our heads all the markets and all the influences on them, and then bringing them together into a portfolio of bets. We would have had to hire and supervise a bunch of different investment managers And because we couldn't have blind faith in them, we'd have to understand how each one made their decisions, which would mean watching what they were doing and why, so we could know what to expect from them while dealing with all their different personality issues. Why would I want to do that? It seemed to me that the way of investing or managing an organization was obsolete, like reading a map instead of following a GPS. Of course, building our system was hard work. It had taken us over 30 years to do it. Having too much money to manage can hurt performance, since the costs of getting in and out of positions can be high because being too big can push the markets. Making over 40% in 2010 had put us in the position of having to return a lot of money to clients who actually wanted to give us more to manage. We were always careful to stay safely short of being too big, lest we kill the goose that lays the golden eggs. Our clients didn't want their money back. They wanted us to grow it. So we were presented with the puzzle of how to maximize our capacity without hurting our performance. We hadn't looked at that before because we'd never had that much money. We quickly discovered that if we just tweaked what we did and created a new fund that managed money the same way as Pure Alpha, but invested it solely in the most liquid markets, our expected returns would be the same and the expected risk only slightly higher. We programmed this new approach into our computers, back-tested it to see how it worked in all countries and timeframes, and explained it to our clients in detail so they could thoroughly understand the logic behind it. As much as I love and have benefited from artificial intelligence, I believe that only people can discover such things and then program computers to do them. That's why I believe that the right people working with each other and with computers are the key to success, and I will definitely agree with that. Toward the end of the year, we opened Pure Alpha Major Markets, and clients invested $15 billion in it. Since then, its returns have been as expected. That is, about the same as Pure Alpha's. Actually better, but only slightly. Our clients were delighted. In fact, this new option was so popular that by 2011, we had to close it to new investment 2. Okay, I'm going to leave it there for today. But yes, as I said yesterday, technology is very, very important. It's really important to make sure that you are using the technology available because it is going to give you an advantage. There is a movie that I really love. It's called The House of Rothschild. And it talks about the fact that everybody was speculating on the market during the Napoleonic War, and that the Rothschilds had a system whereby, for example, a courier would run from the battlefield and they would ride a horse, and it would take them about 3 days to be able to get from the battlefield to England to give the news of what had actually happened in the battle. But what the Rothschilds did was they had a carrier pigeon, and that pigeon only needed 1 day to be able to get from France to England, less than a day actually. And so he already knew 2 days before everybody else what the market would do, because he knew that Napoleon had lost, but he knew it 2 days before. So the market kept going down, 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 and he kept buying, and everybody thought he was insane because they thought that the war was lost. And so they were all selling, and he was buying, but he already knew 2 days before. And so when the news came through that Napoleon had lost, the market went up like crazy. And so technology gives you the ability to be ahead of the curve. If you are still doing things the old way, it is not really good. Having said that, there are different strategies and different things that work in different ways. So for example, Warren Buffett doesn't need it because his system is long and doesn't need timely information. He just needs to know what's happening now, and he can use that to predict into the future. Whereas Ray Dalio's system, you need that information as quickly as possible because you are always tweaking the system based on what is happening right now. Okay, we're going to leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed that today. If you would like to be able to watch the replays, if you like this, if you would like to watch the videos of me reading Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad Poor Dad, if you'd like to be able to watch The Art of Thinking Clearly, you can go to the Passive Cash Flow Club, which is our YouTube channel, and you can find all the videos there, even the previous videos of the readings of Ray Dalio's principles. If you would like to ask any financial, economic, wealth creation financial freedom questions, you can do that by reaching out on Instagram. And you can do that by going to business_team_6_official. And I would love to be able to get to know you there and hear your questions. And then we'll turn them into videos and put them up on YouTube. Good for you, because then your questions get answered. And you never know, it might be somebody else's question that you are interested in. So make sure that you subscribe when you're on the Passive Cashflow Club on YouTube, because that way you are able to get notified when a new video has been published. And who knows, it might be a question that you have that you had not asked yet, and it might help you and solve one of the challenges that you are facing at the moment. So would love to see you on Instagram and on the Passive Cashflow Club on YouTube. And if you would like to join us for a game of a computerized simulator of cash flow, or of life, as I like to call it, we run events every 2 weeks. And if you'd like to know when and where and how, then reach out on Instagram and let me know that you're interested in cash flow. It is a great game that is going to trick your brain to help you succeed more. It's going to allow you to learn about finances and how to invest, business, real estate, stock market, all of these different things. It is a great way to take action without actually without risking anything at all. So it is really, really good, and we'd love to have you come and play a game with us. So reach out and let me know what we can do to assist you with all of these things. I'm looking forward to seeing you again for another reading tomorrow. And yes, I have to get going, but I will see you all tomorrow at 8 a.m. for another reading. And remember to make the switch to unlock your rich, because if you keep doing everything the same way, nothing will change until you make that switch. And then you will start to unlock that rich.